Is anybody online?
Yeah, Councilmember Bodie and Richie.
Oh, great, I get it. Good evening, everybody.
Hi,
It's
everyone.
A little after 7, so we will go ahead and we have enough people here, so we're gonna kick off our February, right? Yes, Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting for a few hours. Yeah, right, it's a little while. So thanks for joining us. Let's see, on the agenda tonight, we will start with, well, welcome introductions. So the board is here, so we can kind of, we have any special guests.
Yeah, we'll do introductions when we get to the short.
Okay, that sounds good. So we can start with the adoption of the agenda, which Corey mailed out earlier. So all, as the board had a chance to take a look at that. And does that sound okay? Thoughts, comments, or move to approve? Okay, a motion and a second to approve. Sorry, maybe I should check. Richie's online. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm online.
Okay, so we're gonna vote on the agenda that Corey sent out earlier. All in favor?
I,
Great. Okay, that's approved. Thanks a lot. Next is to review and approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Those are copied in behind the agenda. Any comments or questions or moving to approve it? To approve. Got one motion to approve. Second. Great. All in favor?
I,
Okay, thank you. Those are approved.
Do public comment first.
Okay.
Sit up here.
And we are going to jump into public comments first on our agenda. So Corey, do you want to manage the order of that?
Yeah, Ross, you can. Go ahead.
Well, you just want me to go ahead.
Yeah.
So I'm Ross Bird and I lived in my home, which wasn't always in Lake Forest Park, but it has been since growth management. So I've lived there for almost 48 years. And I was actually on this committee some time ago for like 12 years until 2014, and then they disbanded all the commissions. But so I've been involved with the city a long time and other things as well. Was involved with the Shoreline Lake Forest Park Arts Council, which is now Shorelake Arts, for 17 years as voluntary board president, and then the first ED for 11 years. And then I worked for the city of Shoreline as their first public art coordinator for a time in my retirement for 7 years. So I've had, a lot of things all around the community, and the art background is relevant to what I'm going to talk about tonight in my 3 minutes. So I've been the chair of the garden tour, Lake Forest Park, Secret Gardens of Lake Forest Park Tour Committee. 12 years, unfortunately. No, it's a great committee. It's great fun, but it's a long time. So I don't know if you're familiar with the tour, if you've been on it, and I meant to bring you bookmarks tonight. They're hot off the press for this year, which is June 15th. And it involves 6 private gardens that people buy tickets to, and a plant and garden art sale in the lower level of the town center. And 4 community nonprofits put this on and benefit from it. And that's the Garden Club, Third Place Commons, Shorelake Arts, and Stewardship Foundation. They've been doing this for the whole 20 years. This is the 20th year of the event. So in addition to them getting a little of the profits back, we've been banking money for public art for Lake Forest Park. And so our first commission is what you see outside City Hall, the 5x5 by Roger Squirrel with metal pillars. That was in 2011 for the city's 50th birthday. So that was pretty exciting, and we've been saving money ever since. And we had a committee, we had the call for artists drafted, and we were ready to come to the park board to present this and get your buy-in. And then the pandemic hit, and then your parks reviews came. And so we've been put off, but we have money and we need to spend it because we can't just keep it in the bank forever as a community organization. So, oh, we also put money, so in addition to that, we put $5,000 into the project for the Blue Heron Park Bridge. So that could be a viable project because the city had a small fund at that point, but not. So that's what we've done so far, and we had done a review of all the parks and selected Horizon View Park as where we wanted to put this second commission. For a number of reasons, but the small amount of public art that the city currently has is all down in flat. And so people said, well, let's put something up there, and it's a bigger park, and you know, we don't say what it would be, we leave that up to the artists, but what we do is we select a location and we put together a call for artists that describes the park and who uses it, and you know, send a map that asks the artists who want to apply to go visit the park, so they see how it's used and see what's there, and they come up with all kinds of ideas that I would never come up with. So we don't say necessarily we want a bench, we want a this, we want a that, how can it be integrated into the park? So I don't know where you are with your planning, but I think we haven't, this little committee hasn't met for 3 years. So, but we're hoping that you still like that idea, and there's too much up there that I know there's a vandalism problem. I've been reading about that. Sure, in area news, but so put together this call for artists, and the call has that, it has the amount, it has the deadline, where to send things, what kinds of documents they have to send, all that sort of thing. And then we put together a committee to triage the applications and select an artist. You don't select the artwork, they don't propose things, because when we narrow it down, if we can't decide between two, we might ask them to make a maquette and bring that in. That's what happened last time. And then we would show it to the city council, but they're not on the committee. But, you know, we need their buy-in. Obviously, we need the city's buy-in to do this, because we want to put it on city property. And we want the park board. And if somebody on the park board has some art interest and experience, they could be on the committee. So then part of the city, so the artist is usually responsible for installation, but obviously you need to work with the city. So Public Works, you know, I'll be meeting with them, and they would be on board with this. And we would, you know, keep the city council appraised of what's happening. And then once it's installed, we have a little ceremony. So that, I just wanted to let you know what's coming down the track, and hope that you have some interest in this. And I don't know if you're allowed to ask me questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
What's the normal timeline, you know, from the time that you put the call for artists out until ribbon cutting?
Yeah, it just depends. It could be a year. Sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes it's a little less than that. But once you select the artist, then they probably have also already thought of some ideas, but they might, you know, come up with a couple of ideas still. Takes a while to kind of finalize what the art's going to be, and then, you know, they have to get their materials, and sometimes they fabricate themselves, and sometimes they send it to somewhere to be fabricated. That costs more usually, but depends what the material is. So yes, it probably takes a year.
Yeah, I'm not asking a calendar, but
Right.
just, you know, not a month, not a decade.
Right. So our hope was be able to put the call out spring, summer, so that maybe after the garden tour. For my time. So that we could select an artist in the fall, and they would have all the rest of the fall and winter and early spring to make the art, and then get it installed 2025 and summer, fall. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. But I was told we need to want to put it at Horizon View Park, that you're planning to put other things up there maybe, and where would they be, or things moving around, because once we charge an artist to design something, we don't want it to be moved in 2 years. So that's kind of something to think about. So I don't know when you're gonna know those things about Horizon View Park.
The pickleball courts have changed a bit last year or two, but they're not going to change more. I think.
I haven't been up there for a while, but, there was some talk about picnic shelter, or do you already have a picnic shelter up there? No. The neighborhood totally did that idea when we proposed it many long years ago. It's their park, they didn't want people invited. Sorry.
Where, can I ask, where in the park are you imagining it and what's the size?
I have no idea.
Okay. Actually, I should back up and just say, I'm so excited. Thank you for doing this work. It's so, yeah, it's so inspiring. It's really exciting to have people come and say we have money and we want to spend it on the park.
So I didn't bring
You're
the
our first
statement
guest
that
to
we
see that.
drafted, but you know, it talks about what's there. There's a playground, there's a pickleball court, there's a pathway through the park, but they have to go visit.
Yeah.
They have to see the site, and as I said, artists come up with things that I would never, ever dream of. Their minds work in different ways, and I'm sort of an organizer person, but I'm not. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll, we'll put this on our to-do list and maybe bring in, Jeff and kind of look at Horizon View and start.
And then maybe Jeff and you and I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Sounds good.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, no more,
That was the public comments?
yeah.
Okay.
I didn't take good notes. What was your name again?
I'm Roz, R-O-Z, Bird, B-I-R-D. And I didn't get your names either. So could you just tell me the hats?
I'm Tyler Dittman.
And Josh Roseanne.
Another person.
Yeah, Richie's on.
Oh, and Richie.
Oh, Amy's now
Yeah.
here.
Oh, great. Can we get their pictures up or are they? off?
Once they put their camera on.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Well, now exciting.
Yeah.
Good ideas.
We've already selected a park. We've already got a process. We've already got money. Yeah.
Everything should be that easy.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, so next is the discussion with SHORELAKE Arts.
That's us.
Yeah. All right,
Hello.
great, here we go.
I'm Nancy Malik. I'm co-president with Tracy Furitani. And this is,
I'm Laura James. I have just recently joined as a board member, but also managing director of the SHORELAKE Arts Organization as we do our EV search.
so in the last few years, you know, we certainly contracted with you guys to do different events. And the last few years, we've done the Battle of the Bands for the 2 to 3 days. So this year, we're looking to see that perhaps we can change that, but we want to make sure we still meet the brief with you guys and doing enough activities with you, not just Shoreline. It's important to us. So we do have right now a tentative date of August 10th. You guys start our concerts in the park series with the first one at Animal Acres Park in June on the 26th. And this would be toward the end of our summer series of different events. And right now it's scheduled for August 10th, but we do have some flexibility in what we might be able to do. So part of our reason for being here is to sort of talk with all of you and see, is there a type of event or something that you guys are interested in that we could make sure that we put together for you guys?
So this would be, sorry, maybe I lost track. So we already have the concert scheduled.
Yes,
On
that one's on June
26th.
15th.
So is that Battle of the Bands or
No,
not?
it's just a regular concert in the park.
Got it. And then the 8-10 date, that's
That's the one that's,
idea for a
right.
kind of a
it's up for
older.
what we do, and
Okay.
technically we would owe you 2 events, so we could
Got
either do something longer that day, an all-day event. Or we could break it up between then, and if we want to keep it in the summer, we have perhaps August 24th, so that would be 2 weeks apart. That we could do something small each of those days. So we want to look and see what is going on with you guys for the summer. And what kind of events you think would be of interest to the people of Lake Forest Park.
I'm sorry if I'm being slow. So is Battle of the Bands one of the options or is it moving?
It's not this year gonna be possible to do the 3-day event. It takes an incredible amount of time and energy to pull all of that together. And the other thing is that it's kind of nice to sort of take a break and mix things up, because then it brings people back and they're like, oh yeah, now it's back. So we're trying to keep things fresh and different, and Battle of the Bands is a relatively new event that started during during COVID. And I don't know if you remember, the first one was sort of done and finalized on a big screen outside of City Hall. So, yeah, so it's a relatively new event. So I think people could be flexible and interested in something, you know, it's been exciting to see the interest in people to come and do different things here.
So I was under the impression that August 10th would be bringing back some of the old Battle of the Bands.
We'd like to be a little more flexible than that. We talked about doing sort of an all-star thing, but we just feel like, we would still like to capture the audience for Battle of the Bands, because it was obviously something that the community was interested in. So whatever we do, we would like to do along those lines. A lot of those bands are actually doing rather well. So to try and get them back may be a bit tricky. So we want to make sure and have some options for different things that we could do. We have some ideas, but we want to really hear from you guys.
Let's hear from Richie. I know Richie's been thinking a lot about community. Yeah.
Richie,
Cultural events.
Yeah.
Yes,
do you wanna chime in on the like multicultural event idea?
yeah, it would be great if we could do something that's family friendly. It's something modeled with at what Shoreline is currently doing. Like last year they had that Celebrate Shoreline event, and it was a really fun outdoor. Most of the activities were at Cromwell Park, and it was well attended. And there were, it was just something that you could see families coming out and just enjoying. And I have not had, in 8 years that I've been here in Lake Forest Park, a similar event that would compare to that. And I have been for the longest time wishing we would be able to organize something similar. And if it's something that Shore Lake Arts would be interested in, I understand that there's a lot of funds that can be tapped. There's money that we have done initial inquiries with for culture. Was that right? Yeah. So that's a funding source we could tap. And then I am also with event organizing work that I'm doing for my PTA at Meridian Park. Have been in touch with a lot of arts group in King County, and I understand they are really doing a lot of outreach, because it allows them to tap into funding from King County that was just recently passed. So, it's really exciting to bring culture and arts to the community, because there's money that can be tapped, and it would be very low cost for the community to organize.
Some money will be available
Yeah,
next year.
so
but
starting in August, doors open was what was passed. It was
Yes,
called
that's right.
science.
It's open.
And so we're understanding right now that those that are administrating it will be making the information available for you to apply for grants come August. So the money will actually be available the following year. But and then it will be on a yearly basis following that.
But that said, with this partnership, we can do something for this year while also looking long-term into the future of what it could be if we had additional funding. And I hear you on the family-friendly side of it. A lot of our events happen in the evening. They happen on weekends, you know, so that just hits one demographic pretty much. So
Yeah.
we're open to, like a morning thing, like maybe it's, you know, calling in a kid-focused band, or it could be a drama, dance, poetry reading, something like that. We could break out of this. It could absolutely be a concert. Festivals are tricky because they are, and that's what, Tori, we were kind of working with initially when Battle of the Bands being 3 days, trying to simplify it by consolidating it into one day and still having the food trucks, still having, but then building out that day to have crafts, to draw in families. It can get very overwhelming very quickly, and we do have a reduced staff, so that's what we're also trying to be thoughtful of. But we absolutely want to, you know, stay fresh and meet the needs.
So Richie, if I'm understanding you, some of the things that you would like us to really keep in mind as we plan are family friendly, and you liked the Celebrate Shoreline event that had multiple things going on that day. And
Yes.
those are things that you would like us to keep in mind as we plan. Is there anything else in particular you'd like us to think about?
That's it. I have an 8-year-old third grader, and I understand several of our park board members also have small kids, and it's really it would really be nice to have an event where we could bring our kids, our young kids, to you know, something that's celebratory and it's in Lake Forest Park.
Yes, and so is the wish that we do something all day, similar to Celebrate Shoreline versus breaking it up into 2 events? Is that what would
I mean, we still
fit the
have,
bill for you guys?
yeah, we still have picnic in the park, which is,
Right.
our
Right.
family friendly.
Mhm.
Geared towards a kid, and I think this year I will be focusing more on the kid, keeping it kid and not doing all. So I think keeping that in mind of
When is that one again?
September
7th.
Yeah, and I think we're providing hands-on art for you guys. Yeah.
I just want to say that I really enjoyed the beer garden aspect. Speaking as a local citizen, it is the only time that I can go and be with my neighbors and hang out. We don't have sidewalks in Lake Forest Park. I never see my neighbors. So that Battle of the Bands, I'm really sad to hear that it won't be happening next year, because it's like one moment when I get to hang out with my neighbors, drink a beer. My kids are right on the other side of the fence, playing with their friends. Yeah. It's delightful. I love that event. You've done an amazing job with it. So if there is, so just as like a yes and.
Yeah,
There's
it really
any
is.
way to hold on to some of those aspects where it's like also adult friendly.
Well, and it doesn't have to happen all in the same event.
Uh-huh.
So we have 2 to 3 slots that we can work with. One can be a morning thing, because I
Yeah.
remember when my kids were younger, it's like 6:30, let's go to the park.
Right.
So, and it's hard to find things. But then also having one that's, you know, early evening.
Yeah.
Or we
It's still
could
that
do
dessert
something
side
all
of
day
things.
where it's sort of with the crafts or activities that are earlier in the day are more for family. And then move into the evening, where we have activities with the beer garden and stuff that would fit the bill, because I really don't want to lose the audience that we've built with Battle of the Bands.
Yeah, and we can close down that brook side and open that street for putting food trucks out there.
Yeah.
Maybe if you can get artists, crafts to be more inside this year, and while having music, I think, and the beer garden, I think is a really good mixture.
Good, okay.
What other kind of events do you do? Like what, like, like the concept of them, you meant clearly concerts,
Yes,
Um,
but,
art activities.
for our mission, we're trying to reach out in multiple ways.
Yeah.
So it's both events and education.
Right.
So those are sort of our two big wings of what we do. So right now, we're doing some artist activities in schools, after school activities for kids, because particularly in Shoreline, there's not a lot of art. It's sort of either art or music, right? And so we're trying to build up art classes and offer those to kids in our neighborhoods. And then we have a series of events. We just finished our Lantern Festival that we, City of Shoreline hosted for us at the Spartan Gym. Next will be the Short Film Festival, which will be at the Shoreline Community College. And then we move into the gala, which is our biggest fundraising event in May. Then we start our summer activities with Roz's Secret Gardens, and we go into the concerts in the park. The gallery has a couple of different things, one in spring, one in summer. And then in the fall, we go on to the 6x6, which is also held at Shoreline Community College, where all the pieces entered are all 6 inches by 6 inches. The entrance fee is $6. It is artists of all ages, and it's so exciting to see the little kids bring in, and all of the artists hung up, and everything's $36, 6 by 6. And so it's super exciting to see. There is a huge, we literally put out the call nationwide. And we actually had a group of folks in Texas for therapy, art therapy folks, who put together a whole bunch of 6 by 6, and they had their own section at the exhibit. And then we end the year, we have Dia de los Muertos that we do with the city. And we end the year with the underground holiday market at the city hall there.
Sure, both those are in Shoreline.
Yeah.
So to build on that, though, we, in these concert series, we have Shakespearean actors come, so we try to mix it up.
Yeah, I was like plays in the park. or
Yeah,
Park
Shakespeare in the Park. is
So
one
that's
of our
something else
series.
we could try to bring into LFP, into the same part, because it
Like
does
kid
draw a
shows,
huge
like
crowd.
that- those
Well,
are
it
fun
varies, depends on, it's the group that puts it on, they usually train for 2 different ones, and we don't have control for that, so whichever ones they do. So, and then depending on the date that they're available, that's the one they're doing that week.
But yeah, how these ideas evolve is we have an idea of what we want to try, and then we go find the artist. Very much like what Ross is doing is, we have this concept of a need that is not being met, or a new audience that we want to try to pull in. So some of the ideas were, you know, poetry or reading slam, or some kind of dance instruction or theater, and kind of flex these other art muscles while keeping alcohol involved. Absolutely, I'm with you.
I do think it's really possible to put together perhaps an all-day event where we start with something a little more family in the earlier part of the day, and have food trucks all day, and move into something in the evening that would be some concerts, so we don't lose our audience from concerts and from the bands, which would, I think, be fun. Yeah.
Which still leaves an option for another event. So an all-day event would satisfy 2 of the contract, just our agreement, and then there's another, because Battle of the Bands was 3 nights. So an all-day would constitute 2 of those.
No, that would, I think, finish it, because we have this concert in the park, and then we have. That one was
We
2.
can still discuss.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we could, I mean, if there's any electric plays, I think is a good idea, or maybe some sort of interactive dancing.
Right.
Like, either of those ideas, I think would be a great addition.
I was gonna say that Shakespeare in the Park, I've gone a number of years when it's at Richmond.
Mhm.
And it's pretty flat there, and sometimes hard, they're pretty exposed. It's sometimes been hard to see and hear. And I actually think Animal Acres would be really good, because it's sort of more of a natural amphitheater and has some shade from the trees.
Yeah, so we can reach out to them and see their availability and go from there.
Different times walking around 5 Acre Wood where I thought where the
Yeah.
sort of the foundation is there. That one of these days, if there was a stage on that, you could do an awesome Midsummer's.
Yeah.
It's like
yeah.
I don't know where everyone's sit, but you know,
No, but it does actually.
I can imagine the actors there.
Yeah, yes.
I think this like third smaller event could be on a weekday
definitely.
Like, I think having that one weekend and then 2 weekdays would be great. Yeah, for us.
Yeah, so this was to open the dialogue, get the thoughts moving, and then you can reach out to me at any time. And I'll reach back out to.
Just let us know if you guys have.
Yeah,
Richie?
We're for our multicultural celebration, we we are bringing in Seattle Opera. They have a school opera, multicultural school opera called Francine and the something Tigers. And I was wondering if it's a 40-minute performance and it's geared for the K-5 crowd. And I was wondering if it's something we can bring to LFP using our mobile stage and
Yeah,
set up at Animal Acres.
Yeah, that might be a good addition to Picnic in the Park. We could talk about.
Is that a something that can be partnered with Shorelake? I believe Seattle Opera offers it for free for schools that are Title I, and that's why we are able to have them at Meridian Park. But if it's going to be like for the city of Lake Forest Park, it will cost, I believe, $2,000 for the performance.
Yeah, it's.
We'll
That's-
we'll
It's the
maybe have to talk
costumes.
about
It's
that.
definitely the costumes.
Yeah.
That might be out of our budget.
There is another group, and I don't know their availability, and I don't know if they're still doing this after COVID, but Storybook Theater did a take on traditional fairy tales, but usually had a sort of more morality lean. So I don't know if they always had a seasonal one that they did, that they rotated through the different areas, but that was definitely a family friendly event.
Yeah, what's interesting about the Seattle Opera piece is that it is using music from different cultures. So it really is multicultural, and the story is about friendship and understanding differences. And so we are at Meridian Park very lucky to get them for free, but it's at Meridian Park, and I was wondering if it's something that can be held in Lake Forest Park, and all the kids at Lake Forest Park can enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I think, Richie, we'll have to talk about that one later, that it's a
Okay.
steep price. But, yeah, we can check back in.
Once in a while, we can look really sad and say, please, we really would like you, and sometimes they reduce rates for
Sometimes.
events like this.
Do you ever charge admission for any of these events?
Yes, we did for Battle of the Bands, but we don't for concerts in the park.
Yeah.
And they don't for Shakespeare in the park either.
Oh,
They just pass the hat. Yeah, those are all things we pay for.
But the past the hats are critical to help sustain it.
where does the hat end up with? the-
I think for
Shirley
the
Gardens?
Shakespeare in the park, there's a sort of a split between the
Okay.
events.
Yeah. Any other comments from the participants online? I thought I saw Amy, but Eric, did I see them both?
Yeah, they both joined.
Okay, just making space for them if they wanna ask any questions or make any comments. I will say, I used to have small kids, now my kids are getting a little bigger, so I also wonder about those like middle grade,
Yes,
what keeps them engaged.
right.
Yeah, I know it's not in the park. Miles was sort of like, oh no, that's kid music. I'm not gonna walk over there. But I'm sure,
What's cool for middle school, I don't know, let me know when you figure that out.
yeah, not us.
Yeah.
There used to be this like science show, this science group that would do like a science show, but they stopped during COVID and they haven't brought it back to the Pacific Northwest yet, but
Whatever happened to Bill Nye?
I too, yeah. But Yeah, maybe, I don't think I got the email that they're back this year, I think there's creeping back to Oregon, but there's some other kind of stuff like that that's coming out, but it's just, it's hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And affordable.
That's
Like,
nice.
we both have very small budgets for stuff, so.
Yeah.
Would it be, I don't know if it's for this event or a good idea at all, but some sort of open mic event, like community open mic, maybe age rated, where, you know, not, so sort of capturing something of the Battle of Bands, but just inviting, you know,
Comedy.
we've got a talented community.
You're not talking karaoke. At the beer garden.
At the beer garden, yeah.
I don't know, I'll let you go, I bet.
I did see a karaoke in a park, one of the cities is starting to do it,
It-
yeah.
yeah, it does.
Yeah, there's
It does
a
have a
city
big
around us.
following, yeah,
I can't remember which city it is, but.
That's funny.
yeah.
Your teenager.
I think if the concept is there, if the theme and expectations.
So they're gonna really want the parents to go up and perform, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Pull their hoodies over their head.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be like parents making TikToks. Kids will be like, we are there to watch you. Make sure you don't post it.
I definitely wanna think about this more, because I'm just thinking about an event I went to recently, the Bushwick Book Club, that I'm not sure you guys ever collaborate with them, but they put this thing together monthly where they have a book. And then maybe 10 local musicians will write songs inspired by that book. We all get together, it's at town hall, and we get to see these 10 local musicians play these original songs, and it's delightful. So much fun. It's really cool. It's really cool. They're nonprofit, but I'm like, how can we do something like that, like we make it Shoreline, or make it LFP? you know?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like draw from our local talent, have some kind of like cool theme. And yeah, different ways in it. So I kind of want to ruminate on it. Can you?
Yeah,
Oh,
oh,
feel free, yes.
absolutely. No
Yes.
decisions are being made tonight. This is just the beginning of the conversation.
Right.
But to make sure that we can lock on something in the next couple of weeks, we should probably work it up a little bit more.
Great,
Um,
this is super helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Really, really good to get about some ideas
Yeah,
and, see what could work. Like you said, re-inspire, so,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think if you guys have more ideas, you can send it my way and then we'll be in touch and.
okay, perfect. That sounds okay. And then, Teresa on our team, but if you wouldn't mind including me, and then we can land some times to come back together and talk. Could you remind me your names again? Alice.
Tyler.
Josh. Okay. And I'm Lauren.
Richie.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Got something about summer, huh?
I.
That was not on my mind.
Yeah, I don't know.
So we are, thank you very much.
Thank you for
Um,
having us.
We're gonna move on to our old business section of the agenda, starting with the work plan. That's,
I'll share my screen.
oh, okay. Great. And I think the status of this is we're looking at, getting our final approval of this so that I can take it to the, city council in a few weeks, I think.
Next week.
Oh, next week, I mean, it's totally on my calendar. And present it there. And to make sure I have all the answers to any questions that they might have. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye. So we have several parts to it. High level, there's the park master plan, which does seem there's a lot going on. The social media work, the increased community vitality and recreation opportunities, community participation, and advise the council on other boards and commissions and committees about park related things.
Yeah, so we kind of came to consensus before the new year, and then had it brought this back up quite yet, so. I think there's any last minute additions or changes.
I think the question really was whether or not Josh wanted to take on social media. Cause I kind of feel like the rest of us were like, oh, too much, but you expressed enthusiasm about it. So
But yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about it and haven't, I don't know that my thinking has changed much, but it hasn't turned against it. So, yeah.
I say we like leave it on there and,
if we don't do it, there's no penalty.
yeah, no.
Okay.
there's-
Your term is extended.
No, and Josh and I can meet in a couple weeks and we can maybe set a goal for like the first article.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can start like every other month.
I think that would be a good
And
start,
just-
just a bit of a plan,
Yeah,
like not high pressure.
Yeah.
But just like some plan to kind of fill out.
yeah, maybe we, maybe in the next meeting or two, even we can do it every other month and someone can just sign up for that month and we can write about it. Just paragraph the picture, hey, this is in our park, go check it out, just something.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, we don't have to make it too crazy, so.
And then community vitality and recreation opportunities was continuing what we're doing with the yoga. And we keep talking about the walking and program with other organizations on that. Pickleball, we've worked on pickleball for a while.
And Amy's on, but the pickleball group, a different pickleball group. They restriped the school LP courts, and apparently it's been popular, very popular over there. And there's 4 courts, I think. So,
They
jobbing.
I think they spoke to us about that a little bit, right?
Yeah, yep,
But it turns
so,
out like we,
yeah, we didn't really
School
know,
property,
yeah, the
so-
school had to approve everything, so.
community participation is the other ones, What, maybe some of these ideas, the summer events, we could partner with them on that. Any other questions or comments about this work plan, how it looks, generally? Yeah, I think with the idea that it is a plan. And we have some flexibility with how we actually do it. But I think the city council wants to just sort of have an idea of what we're working on.
And
Want to add anything about fundraising? Probably not.
Like what?
Like the brick plan for the park or. You know,
I feel like
Does that come from us or does that come from, do we need direction from the city council?
council.
I don't
I don't think we need to put it on our plan, but yeah,
It
it,
could be
like,
under.
this doesn't mean this is our only our tasks for the year too. We get other things.
And the open mic idea was something I thought of a while back and forgot about every time we've met, but I could see it being a regular thing in the parks also. Potentially, I have no idea how to organize anything like it,
It's kind
so
of low barrier,
I
right?
don't wanna
Yeah. and
say too much
also-
and volunteer myself, but.
Yeah, that might be like something we could bring in third place comments soon too, like that. That's a good place for something like that, we could see what kind of partnership we can put there too. So.
I know one time I was there was a ukulele group that was just playing, around at some tables one evening, and I guess I think in Edmonds, they go by the waterfront and perform sometimes, or not.
I think, they're kind of around, I think they bring them out to the farmer's market every once in a while too.
I think the ukulele group is that is their regular meeting that they do. There's a group
Yeah,
that they meet there on a regular basis.
but it might be possible to turn them out to a park sometime. Or, maybe, and when weather permitting. Have it be
Good.
something outdoor and open to the community and people can hear it and swing by. Cause I think that they do also,
Good
yeah, I think they've got a regular schedule on some evening during the week at Third Place Commons and then in Edmonds by the waterfront. Also on some, I think, weekly schedule. outdoors are nice for that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I have their information. I was planning on inviting them to Meridian Park. So I know that I just don't have it in front of me right now. I know they have a regular schedule and I've met them, and I will talk to them if it's something that we're interested in doing and partnering for summer.
Yeah, we could see if maybe that they might be able to come to picnic in the park or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll start the conversation with them.
Great.
This is Amy. I'm wondering if there's a way that we can put out some kind of announcement that we're looking for local artists, local groups, local performers. I think there's a lot of people who are looking for a venue. And I'm just wondering if there's a way for us to reach out to the community and sort of tap into more of our community. That's what I'd like to see.
Love that, maybe like, what if the newsletter had a little call for performers for the picnic in the park, like. We could be the board, we could decide,
Yeah.
yeah, we could look at audition tapes.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I just think there really are a lot of people who want to perform and they don't have an avenue or a venue or know how to do it or get started, and they may just want to, there are people who are working together rehearsing, but they haven't found their platform. So it might be very nice for the city to reach out to them and just say, we'd love to have you come and perform. Just, you would need, of course, we'd need an audition. So yes.
Yeah,
I think that would be great.
Pretty soon.
Yeah, when I book, I do try to book local. Yeah, everyone's pretty.
You know, fly them in from.
Yeah, no, but like, other cities have used them or something, so they're, within a decent amount of radius, so. Yeah, we can play with that parkboard call, parkboard stage, 1 hour or something, so.
Part of what, with the ukulele group, I think it is just a pickup thing. It's not like there's no audition to get in. You show up with the ukulele and you play, and so like there are things like that can also be a nice having those sorts of less formal opportunities where it is just like, I've got a barn, you've got some old curtains, let's put on a show, can be a good way to bring, sort of thinking of the model of yoga in the park, that it's not a high barrier to entry. It shouldn't be horrible and it shouldn't be like offensive.
I mean, not
There should be some sort of screening can go into it, but kids who have
Yeah.
a really good drum routine that they've worked out can come out and do something, or people who've got a banjo and a guitar and want to do a bluegrass thing. Like you can, if you
Like a variety.
if you show that that's a thing that can be there in the parks, I think people may start showing up and saying it's fun.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who'd love that. Especially some young kids who are working really hard and preparing for auditions elsewhere. We have all kinds of music in Lake Forest Park. We have a very, very fine music program at the high school and junior high. Much better than many, many, many other places. I don't know what shape it's in now with cuts and everything, but I'm hoping it's still pretty strong. It certainly was many, many years ago.
Wow. Kellogg is pretty good.
I think this is a great idea to continue with like the comments. I think maybe in like the less sunnier months and having
Mhm.
of two in winter and fall and spring really, so.
Yeah, and if the weather permits and there's interest, encouraging it to be outside.
Yeah.
Cause that also opens it up to different, it's the sort of thing that could rotate from across venues, different parts of the city. And, I mean, I found the ukulele thing, we were there for something else and there were just people playing ukuleles, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
let's go check that out. And so having it in different parts of the city could be a way to bring people in.
What venues do we have for that kind of thing?
The showmobile can only go at Animal Acres.
Okay.
And there's only power of the showmobile.
I didn't
Yeah,
realize that.
yeah. At
Otherwise,
Animal Acres.
third place.
Yeah, there
Right,
was
this is
common.
your one.
Yes,
Do we ever use the schools for anything? For the school
It's very-
property? Is it- Other ideas?
Hmm.
And it-
The Shore Crest Performing Arts Center comes to mind. I've never been there, but I would, it might be a shoreline, but there's that.
it's far.
Yeah.
Maybe in like a couple of years, you know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that big deck could be a great stage.
Oh, totally, totally. No.
All parking.
Pave it all.
I think we do have more to get to.
We need to get rid of the lawn and then pave it all.
So I think, Corey, I think the next steps on this, the work plan are to review it by this group, which we've been doing, and then finish it. Does anybody want to move that we approve it and second it? Or does it need more work?
Yeah, I don't think anything that we said needs to change anything that's written
Yeah.
here. I think it's consistent.
Move to approve.
Second,
Great, all in favor of the work plan, please.
Aye.
Affirmation.
I,
That sounds like most people at least. Thank you very much. I guess I'll talk about that at the council meeting next week.
And if anyone else wants to join.
Yeah, please come on down. Get the whole board up there. Okay, so that one's done. What's the next one on the list? Where's the agenda? Oh yeah, the giant park project. Review of the survey design, survey responses and the open house outputs. Did anybody, so we can move on to that now. Was
Yeah,
anybody able to go to the open house?
I was there.
I was,
Greg was there.
I was there.
Were you there? No, I was not.
I missed it. I was sick the whole time.
Oh,
Week.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff going around right now.
Yeah.
But let me
Uh,
stop.
So Corey, what?
So it'd be nice to have you guys agree on a park recommendation to council tonight. Your guys.
Like among the options
Yeah,
or.
of the options, like from that survey, we can go through each, like, question right now and, deliberate and hopefully come
Each
to,
design question.
yeah. Or like, yeah, the option, and deliberate and see if we can come to a conclusion tonight.
Okay.
And remember, this is like the concept design of these sections, so. Okay, well, survey, or I have the words, I'm gonna start with the doc and then go up for these. I feel like that might be the easier way.
Action.
But we did at least, I mean, we've discussed that at least as a group, so we.
Yeah, like you guys.
Our minds
you
may
guys-
be
You guys have
shifted, but-
already had this twice now, so. I think from your guys' last meeting, you guys had some really good discussion of close to having your ideas. kind of-
No, I think it's different. Shelter. Oh, there's the doc. Oh, the survey results were super helpful. See?
I trust your guys' own.
I mean. My question is, I really like the expensive options. So am I trying, this is my same question last month, it's like, am I trying to be frugal? Or am I trying to be aspirational?
And I don't think you should worry about that. Don't worry about that. Worry about the concept of the park and what you see for it.
Tyler, could
Could I just
you,
add on that? Could I just add on that? Yes, pick the concept that you most want. And then, design features or economies later, that can be tweaked or, grant funds or other things, we'll take that into account, but, down the road. But for now, tell us, we are most interested in the concept that you think is the best.
Thank you, that's helpful. That makes sense to me too, just of the, we should at least know what we want, and then kind of, if we need to make trade-offs from there, that's good to know. And that's when maybe the money kind of play, might not be our decision, but we might have input into that later, that's fine. But I think we can at least start with the concept of the thing that we think is gonna work, and provide the best, I guess, address the community's needs the best.
Yeah.
Okay, so the.
Tyler, did you say there was a survey? Did you say we have survey data that tells us what the community was telling
Yeah.
us in terms of what they want? Could you share that? I don't know what that is.
That was
So,
in Corey's email. Corey attached it to her email that she sent. When was that, yesterday?
Yes.
Yes, her most recent.
I'm
email.
sorry, I've been traveling. I'm in California
you
now,
get it.
so
We get it.
I didn't get to do anything. So can you just share a little bit about what the community, generally, what the community is going for in terms of these
Yeah.
two options
totally.
here?
So maybe we can talk a little bit about what the options even are. So can you see this, this screen that Corey's sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So then the top there, that's even better. The top option is the all activity dock with more spaces to it, a little, not just a little longer, I think a decent amount longer. And it looks to me like it's getting into the deeper water, a little bit better also.
Yeah.
So that's the top option. And then the lower one,
And that one also has the two boat launches out at the far end as well.
right.
Mhm.
I can't remember if it was with us here or if it was at I heard them talking at the open house that about maybe trying to make that part of like a water trail that would connect.
Oh.
Similar, that, that you may have then people coming in from the water side into the park.
That's it.
Well, it wouldn't be like boats.
Not like motor, yeah.
Okay.
Small, like
Like,
kayaks.
okay.
Right, so we were gonna canoe over.
Yeah.
Not like a mega yacht.
Human powered boats.
Even it wouldn't be a ski boat.
A manpower, whatever.
Yeah, no motors.
Paddleboard at Logville and come over. That would be a fun little trip.
Yeah.
And then go back.
And even connect that out to like Juanita Bay or
Yeah.
if you were feeling particularly energetic.
And then, so the survey results were, 155 people took this part of the survey.
Mhm.
52% wanted the option one, the all activity dock, and 48 wanted the honest dock. So as I mentioned, I mean, not determinative, I wouldn't think. Both seem useful. I did not notice the comments that really.
The one comment that stuck out to me was that older kids would enjoy the swimming dock. That would be a place that they could congregate and sort of have some cool kid space.
The swim dock, do you mean the float, the
float.
individual float?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it made
Yeah.
sense what happens at the Civic Club every summer, which is that all the teens and preteens congregate out at the end of the dock and have a real social scene down there.
Yeah.
So I think that's gonna happen either way. I think there will be sort of like teen zone on the dock. And I actually am really agnostic about this choice. I don't have a preference, but I do like thinking about how older kids are using this park, because I'm sensitive to the comments elsewhere that say there aren't a lot of things for kids to do at this park, so think about that.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the float would be that cool spot that
Yeah,
depending, yeah, if it's not during school time, then yes, I would imagine kids would wind up out there, but also that if you're with a group, you know, older people might swim out there and have their own little space, like it gives it that, and you're in the lake, and I think people like that, and it defines the space a little bit, sort of sets, this is the outer corner,
yeah.
and it doesn't seem automatically that you couldn't put a float in with the longer dock if
Yeah, that
there
might
was a
be
strong.
something in addition or later, we can maybe take note of that dock, swim dock, and kind of put that in the like extra
Right.
request.
Yeah, I mean, it's money, and maybe there's extra permitting that would be attached to it somehow, but
I think it's, I don't know how they count the dock coverage part of it, right? That seems to be an issue with how much surface area is covered by the dock, the deck. I know that applies to the deck coming directly from the land. I don't know how it applies to a float. If it's even a float, I imagine that's actually floating out there.
I'm sure it's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there
Kinda
were
like that.
people who were at the open house, there were people who were wondering with the boat launches at the end of the dock, whether that would be disruptive for people who were walking or sitting or just hanging out on the dock.
All
You
the
know,
boats going back and forth.
You walk by with a stand-up paddle board or a kayak, and you're gonna wind up with people getting wet in the head.
I will say one thing for me, maintenance wise is coming up is like, how does our crew get out there to maintain it? So I'll put that in a note to our.
On the float.
Yeah,
The floating dock.
yeah.
I feel like emphasize that though, I'm thinking about all weather use, and that you could use a dock all year round. If you are that teenager who used to be with their friends, you can go out and sit at the end of that dock in February.
Well, it's like the main thing that people said that they like about Lime Creek is they want more viewing space. And so that the long one does have those extra. Yeah, you know, these would be literally just viewing spaces.
And those are there on the other as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Those are still the same viewing square footage. It basically, the long one moves the square footage to the dock on the swimming side, right?
Is that top one wider also? Is that the idea?
That's correct.
But I don't know that I mean, I think maybe they budgeted it at a particular size, but you know, an extra foot wide adds to the cost. Possibly dramatically if it's 100 feet long, you know, it's 100 square feet.
That probably also goes to, if you're gonna be carrying your kayak out there, you might need a wider dock, right?
It goes to the question though, of soft launch, like if you
Yeah.
can't channel people to launch in and out of a designated area, they shouldn't be bringing their boats out on this.
We wanna.
So what's the point of that? The far two little fingers.
Sure. I kind of feel like the end of the dock should be a social space, not a boat space.
That can be discussed.
Could turn into that.
Yeah.
If I remember, I think maybe the issue there was that the water is quite shallow. And that they were
Yeah.
concerned, some people might not be, that for some paddle powered things, it would still be not adequate for that kind of launching, but I'm not sure.
I could see this.
I mean, a kayak doesn't have much draft to it, so.
But in winter, when the water's lower, you really don't wanna get wet. Your feet, like, might be nice to be able to walk out of the dock, walk in kayak and not get wet.
We want to
Not very well.
make a decision or come back. We can go through all these real quick and then come back or.
I mean, I'll take some initial thoughts on it. If we're aligned, maybe it's easier to make a decision. My thought is I kind of like the all activity dock, the concept of it. I think that gets people onto the water. That's what they're looking for. And more access points to the water and more space to be on the water. Kind of like the little float too. Seems like a nice add-on. Any other comments, or thoughts?
I like the all activity dock as well, because it's with a bigger park, I can imagine bigger crowds and more usage of the dock.
Yeah,
And I love the dock at Lion Creek. My family were there all the time, and we are out on the dock bird watching, and we have fond memories of um camping out for the 4th of July fireworks from Kenmore, and then looking behind us, and you'll have fireworks display at the beach club. So
Right.
it's a really nice feature to have. And the longer and wider it is, the better, because we should expect more usage, that because there is the development and it's a bigger park, and we want the whole community of Lake Forest Park to enjoy Lion Creek.
yeah, I like the all activity dock and the addition of the swim dock. The swim, whatever that platform. So, yeah. I'd like to see both.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with what people are saying, that, you know, I can easily imagine that area number 4 being a good hangout for all sorts of people, kids jumping in and off. And if
Mhm.
there was possible to have a float as well, I could definitely. We've all been to parks where there's something like that there and it gets a lot of use. And that's what we
Yeah.
want. We want to use it and have fun with it. So I think all else being equal, and it's not, because as they said, square footage is the cost driver. But all else being equal, I think. And I think they also said that this is the sort of thing where if we can do it, it's gonna be harder to come back to some of these decisions. It's better to, so that, you know, probably better to try to maximize that and have it ready and not try to revisit it down the road. Because we want this to be used.
I agree. Yeah. Okay.
Great. I think we're pretty well
Yeah.
aligned on that one.
Unlike the community is evenly divided. We're like, no, spend the money.
How about, so the next one on my list, if I'm going up, is the play areas. And
Oh.
so this one had 3 options and then a 4th option that people put in the comments, it sounded to me. I didn't read the comments thoroughly, but maybe you could speak to that a little bit. Looks like generally the preference on the survey, which would just read it out for everybody, was 144 people answered. Big Timbers got, that's the option 1 there, got 12.5%. Nature Inspired, which is option 2, got 71, and From Nature got 16. So pretty clear winner of those 3 options, but then the comments got into some other issues.
I'll say I took this stuff to the Brookside PTA meeting. And the feedback that I got there was, are you kidding me? These are 3 different pictures of logs. And it gets worse from there. It was, what is Lake Forest Park going to care about families? Where can my older or middle-aged children go to hang out and play? This is not a playground, and Lake Forest Park needs children. So, doing my due diligence and reporting back. It's helpful. I have seen kids play on things like this, and
These might not have been the best pictures, I guess, but there are very cool nature play,
yes.
yeah, using natural objects to create the
And
structure.
This is one where we can redesign a little bit, you know, there's like rope climbing things. The logs and like rocks to climb on and stuff, but this is not a playground park. This is a park for water access, so that is the main goal of this park. It's not gonna have a giant.
I think one thing that people called out in the comments, and that I think, so one thing I think when people were picking option 2, I noticed people looking really closely at these pictures at the open house.
Yeah.
And if you look closely at the picture in option 2, there is a larger playground in the background. And I think that people were doing that close reading and seeing in the background that there was more play structure. And they were like, yeah, we want more play structure. So I think that that's what, you know, they were, because otherwise, yeah, there's not a lot to distinguish between them. But there is like a climbing wall, there's stuff going on. And I was talking to one of the consultants.
Yeah.
At us, and you know, Mike
Right.
Miles was like, oh, what about a treehouse? We should have a treehouse there. And they were like, oh yeah, that could probably work. Like the trees are probably right for that maybe. And people are gonna climb it anyway, so maybe we just like build something onto the trees so that they do it safely for themselves and for the trees. So yeah, I mean, I think that this is an area where there are options. And I see people calling out in the comments here, the assumption that whatever play structures shouldn't obstruct the view, that maybe that's not something that should be a priority, that maybe something that goes a little bit taller, that has a little bit more play structure feel to it, even if it obstructs the view from the house, would be okay, and I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
And I did present, I didn't go through all of this with the LPPTA, but just sort of showed the maps and talked people through it and got similar, and they didn't see the pictures. So I didn't get quite the aggressive response back, but I think, yeah, people were very excited to know what the deal, like that was what everyone was looking for first. Where's the playground? What's it gonna be like? What are we doing there? That's important. So, you know, I think we can elevate that as a priority. You know, it's water access, but then while you're there, you want to play.
Yeah, and there are very cool nature themed playgrounds out there. Remember one of your kids?
Yeah, I was
like looking at the.
Oh, yeah, my kids are, and I've been to playgrounds like this and I love them, so I'm just representing what I heard.
Yeah.
And I'll say it didn't come out, and the meeting was really great, folks are super excited, it was more after the survey, after they did the survey, then it was like, hold on. We want a playground.
And yeah, I think partly these pictures are not. I don't know that there's enough of a distinction among them for that if someone took it and was like, oh yeah, these are all 3 slightly different versions, like these are unfinished logs and these are finished logs, it's all the same. And I suspect that there was more thought process to it that is not well represented by it. But I definitely saw that at the open house, that people were looking in the background of the nature inspired, being like, and also just looking, you know, there are big rocks as well as a log, and there's different ways to play with it. And I think, and you know,
You know, maybe we can add like one of those spinny things in there too.
a slide somewhere, or
Yeah, like there's a lot of room to.
ropes going to something.
Yeah.
I do think we're really trying to speak to and balance 2 pretty, I don't know if they're separate, but distinct desires. And one, there's a large demographic that really want a peaceful and nature focused preserve and the view. And then there's a group that's like, this is a chance for a family park and play. And what I really appreciate about the design we have is that it does both. And so while we're in the play area, my impulse would be to make the play area a play area and the nature preserve. And yes, keep the vibe, but if the question is there going to be more or less playground equipment, why not lean into a little more?
Including conceivably extending it maybe across the path into some of that lawn space.
I'll maybe touch the wall.
Oh, that's right, there's, yeah.
But Yeah, so maybe a good recommendation would be,
I'm hearing the recommendation that it's like the idea of a nature inspired kind of design vibe is consistent with how we all want the park to look, but to make sure that it's actually a play area. And
Yeah.
not sort of something the kids are gonna get bored with in like 3 minutes. Something that has some hype to it, something that is really fun.
that you can play with multiple ways.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if I'm looking at the Big Timbers one from a kid's eye, that feels like there's a way to play with it.
Yep, you walk on it.
I just read the survey. I found the survey stuff. Thank
Great.
you, Corey. And it really sounds like the people that participated in the survey want a playground of some, you know, more play structures of some kind, more than what is illustrated in these pictures. Did you guys get that feeling from the comments?
I did too. I
Okay,
did too, Amy. I agree with you. And I feel like this is more of an expression of the community's demand or need for a playground. It doesn't necessarily have to be at Lion Creek. We can have it at Animal Acres. It's the bottom line is the community needs a playground, a proper playground, a good playground.
right, right.
this just inspire us to really look at Horizon View and really we need to start feeding that playground. That's
Yeah.
also good feedback that we're
Yeah.
getting.
But I'm also thinking about like Civic Club, where
Yeah.
you go there and you get the kids into their swimsuits and then they're on the play structure, right? Like I think for the way that we are imagining people using the park, when, you know, parents are picnicking, parents are
Yeah.
off on the paddleboard, the kids still need something it's part of that use is making sure that there's a way that the kids can entertain themselves so that grown-ups can do their grown-up things in the space.
Yeah, so maybe we need to go back to the designers on the play area and say, hey, we need some alternatives. The community seems to want more, you know, play structure than just logs and climbing rocks. See what
Yeah.
they can come up with within a,
Sure.
you know, reasonable budget. They've sure done a great job. I can't imagine we can't go back to them and say, hey, you know, this is what we're hearing.
Well,
And
that's what
I
this-
kind of agree with the parents that, you know, obviously the parents who took the time to, you know, make comments, they're all saying we need a playground there. And I think that's a good idea. I think we should just go back to the designers.
That's what your guys' recommendation is kind of going geared toward that, keeping it maybe in nature inspired, but beefing it up.
Yeah. I'll throw out there the idea, I've only been to the club a few times, but you're right, I've seen a lot of kids in swimsuits on the play structure.
Right.
It's a year-round thing, right? Like you can only spend so long in the water. And in
Yeah.
February, like I'm not gonna go in the water there. Maybe one day. But I think my kids
Oh.
have planned all year.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. So I think it's okay to think of it as a real component of the park.
And something, like at St. Edward's, the playground there is very, very wooden, very nature feeling, but there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Well, it's not gonna be at that scale,
Right.
but I think, for what we need for the city council recommendation to move forward now, I think we can say, you know, the nature inspired option. And then as it moves, I don't think that any of what we're discussing now. I don't think that we're locking ourselves out of any of the other options.
No, I don't
But
think so.
we are saying that we want it to be. That, you know, what they were leaning towards with that nature inspired design option is probably the closest.
Yeah.
And that there's probably, even if we wanted them to be moving into a different, like, there's not really a lot of other space that we could expand it to, that, you know, the footprint, which is what a lot of what we're locking in here
Yeah.
couldn't change very much. The trees have to be where they are, the path location is constrained, the lawn location is constrained. So, you know, there's not big changes, but there is still room to make changes as this goes to actual like architecture and landscape
Right.
design. Ground design.
Right.
Did you, that sounded like a pretty consistent answer.
Yeah.
Did you, okay, great. Should we move on to the shelters? Shelter options,
Yeah.
one, sorry, singular shelter, but a few different options. This one had 3 options presented. Simple, less cost, balanced design and cost, or showpiece, more cost. And 10%, 9% like the last option of showpiece, which I think just means like more elaborate, like design.
And a fireplace.
Yeah, yeah. And then the rest of it was split roughly between the other 2 options. Simple and balanced, but which ones?
Yeah, that's not a rendering, it's just somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Somewhere between a roof and minimal support to hold it up so it doesn't fall down and something really designed.
Yeah, if you guys remember the presentation when they came, it kind of showed
Mhm.
that.
Any thoughts on this? Like I didn't, so let's look at the any themes in the comments here.
People want amenities. I see that they want a place to gather and they want to be able to hook up with a paddleboard, run electricity, have water.
And a lot of that, I think we wouldn't want them doing here. This is like picnic shelter, right? Like,
Shelter.
we don't necessarily want people inflating.
There would be a different,
Yeah.
yeah, there'd be, there's a different spot for that.
So it may just be that they didn't see another place to put that comment in, but
But then this might have water and electricity on it.
I do, the thing, the comment number 1 that compares it to the structured animal acres is interesting to me because that structured animal acres is in high use in the summer and is empty the rest of the year. So there is this thought about, are we trying to build something that is year round? Because if that's the case, then putting it back on it makes a big difference.
yeah, that's, and I mean, the fireplace potentially also something that you can use to generate some heat.
Yeah, and
Something
I
that
don't
has at
know-
least some wind shelter.
I don't know if. Maintenance and insurance wise. Will want to actually put that fire portion in, so just keep that there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether, how that differs from having a grill. Right, where, you know, which it is not uncommon in parks to have, you know, hibachi things, but. Yeah, we don't want people burning down for sure. But I agree, having some sort of, you know, having it be screened enough that it is multi-season.
Be a joint seated place.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, especially at that location, you know, all through the winter, it's gonna be beautiful in a way that Animal Acres may not have the same appeal as just a destination on its own. If you're not having
something covered.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that balance design and cost at the wall.
Yeah.
That's about right.
How about for number 2?
Yeah. I hope for number 2 also. Something on that road. Are we aligned on that?
Richie, Amy?
Any
Yeah.
other-
Sure.
My vote is for a balanced design, although I disagree with the closed portion. I feel like I going to other parks with their shelters, there's something to be said about an open structure that doesn't block your sight line, because then you get full measure of nature, and especially for where it's going to be located and the footprint, and within the big the overall feature of the park. The park itself, it's not that big, and so anything enclosed kind of, makes it, I just aesthetically speaking, and just imagining the structure within its space, I'd prefer it to be open on all sides than having something blocking on one side and open on another.
Yeah, because aren't we gonna have a building that's already there that they're gonna keep and redo, or is this the redo of that? I'm confused.
It's that number 2 right there, and that's like what's there. Like that's
Nice.
the footprint
get-
going over it, yeah. And
Exactly, it's in that exact space.
And to speak to like sightline, that is something that will be in the more the design phase of like, is a wall plausible to put there, safety, functional, so. That, the details of that, it will be done later, but.
But I think it is also, it'll be visible from the lake, it'll be visible for everyone on the dock and everything, so it's worth.
Oh, and then if you look at the structure, the shelter at Log Boom, it's open on all sides and it gets used all season.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that the details will come up in the design.
Yeah.
Where it actually showed what they have. As a starting point, I think we're generally aligned. That's what it sounds like to me.
I'm kind of with Richie that I prefer to have something really open. And, not a lot of walls. I just don't think it's I personally don't think it's necessary, but that's my feeling. And I didn't get a sense reading the survey that it got much except to add a play structure again, which I thought was funny.
But a rock climbing wall.
Right? Zip line
Yeah, there you go.
into the water.
Okay.
Talk about insurance.
Yeah. Somehow a zip line is always requested in these things.
Jesus.
I just don't find them that fun, but they never go fast enough.
Yeah.
Well, we can design one that goes fast.
There we go. Okay, there we go.
Top of the big house into the water.
Yeah, there you go. Only June.
Right.
Yeah, I
So
think we're all.
do we have so we can summarize all that in, do you think?
Yeah, I think option 2, later design at looking at a wall option.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. It allows that access to the
Yeah.
the environment,
Right.
but not focusing on the
Nothing
showpiece,
too
like being
crazy.
like over the top structure.
Right.
That seems pretty consistent.
Yeah, I think balanced design and cost is reasonable. That's what we're looking for.
Right, so that gets us back, if I'm going up the survey to beach options. And the 2 beach options that were presented, they're on the screen here. One is all beach, the other one is designated, all beach and lawn, I think is what a lot of people recognize. The other one is to designate a portion of it as watercraft loading on the lake with essentially a gravel path. And a sandy spot on the beach, separated a little bit, just for the launching. And the responses were 156 people responded, and 60% said all beach, 40% said.
Yeah.
Doesn't launch area. Any comments on that, or any thoughts from the board?
I do think that the first comment in the survey was very intuitive, saying that without a soft launch area, people will likely drag their boats across the lawn, damaging it and disrupting the people sitting and enjoying the waterfront. I thought that was pretty smart. Cause that's what's gonna happen. I know that happens at the Civic Club, even though there's a launch there. You see the kids dragging the stuff across.
I mean, they still might do it. right?
Yeah,
If we have the all access, all activity dock though. And there's a path. That, you know,
Right.
paved puts you onto the dock. I feel
Right.
like most craft people would take that path. Except for.
yeah,
the
let's
people-
hope so.
And those dock designs did have some sort of
Yeah.
launch on the dock.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my inclination would be that. I think people want beach. And
Yeah.
that let's have do the full beach. And
Right.
if it proves to be a problem, you can sort of look where people make footpaths. And adding a gravel path later that people can use and putting some signage and putting some sort of barrier on the beach just to say, this is the launching area. Maybe a sort of effect, see how it works.
Yeah.
If that proves necessary. We don't necessarily, we don't need to like put vegetation in that takes away from some of the beach area. Which is if we're wanting this to be waterfront access.
Yeah. I mean, it's not gonna be that big, you know, for the number of people that I think are gonna wanna use it. I think more beach. I'm for the all beach.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like you can't launch a watercraft from the all beach, right? It's just about if it's overlapping another use.
Yeah,
Maybe one.
I'm also for all beach, and I feel like as with the comments, I feel like the lack of parking will naturally push
Yeah.
individuals that have kayaks to launch to choose Log Boom over Lion Creek because there's parking and it's easy to you know just carry their kayaks to the launch areas. So I'm not too worried about the kayaks. I'm more for, families enjoying the shoreline, and an all beach would satisfy that.
Yeah, I think when I first looked at it, I will say I like the idea of the soft launch area. But if I remember the size of that beach and really I think to your point about the purpose of the park is to get people like that shore access. I'm going back toward all beach and the idea that we can, if it turns out to be a problem, we can find a way to address it. But with the dock and with the beach and with the probably not super high use of like people bringing like 50 kayaks down at once. I just don't, maybe I don't see the need for that soft launch area right now. Is that a fair summary for everyone?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
reiterating that original survey said, I think it was almost 60% of people said the number one thing was beach access.
Yeah.
right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that's accurate. I think there's an interpretation of that beach access could have included, includes from taking your watercraft down there.
Which
And
we're still
still
serving
doing-
either way from
yeah.
the dock, you know, we're not,
Or the beach even, like,
Yeah.
are we gonna prohibit it from the beach? I mean,
No,
even-
I mean, if it were a problem, yeah, it's an option, but, and there's some sort of like possibly permitting thing of that you need. To somehow separate it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that. Yeah, it's something that you can maybe change later down.
But yeah, if we need to put up some sort of fencing down the road to say this is the official area.
So are we all in favor of all beach?
Seems like it, yeah,
I think so.
great. On to question 2.
Great.
Go back first. Select your preference for the Lion Creek Waterfront Preserve options of restore the forested buffer, or that's one, or restore the floodplain meadow. And the floodplain meadow got 60%, and the forested buffer got 40%.
We're talking about this.
Neither do I. I would be really interested to see what that forested, restore floodplain meadow or forested buffer, the meadow one in these votes.
Which is probably people preferring to have more, a little bit more view.
Yeah, in space.
And I think Lion Creek can feel a little bit obstructed or cluttered.
Mhm.
And I guess the other, but the thing that people do raise in the comments and that we want to be sure of is, you know, not interfering. It is a salmon bearing stream, so are we not doing enough to keep it cool, or not otherwise protecting it as habitat? But I wouldn't think that this would make big differences one way or the other.
A lot of people seem to say, I don't know, whatever's best.
Right.
So for like environmental purposes, right? Do we have any indication of what that is?
I think, well, I don't know, maybe Tracy could speak to this a little bit better, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, the consensus is definitely that people say whatever's better for the environment. Almost every comment refers to that in some way or another. So,
both have benefits. This is only improving the environment out there.
Yeah.
So
okay,
Do you have to pick an option? I think the option would,
that.
is that, like, yes.
Yes.
yeah,
Pick the one that does the best restoration to like, ensure the health of the creek and the sort of the fit. with
Right.
its use. It's a preserve next to a park.
The only question is, does this tie into that question about dredging the waterfront? And the silt that is coming down through Lion Creek?
No, this
not
isn't
it.
going to.
Okay, all right, good.
I vote for option 2.
I would think that option 2 would be better for birding and things like that.
Yes.
More sea habitats. So I lean that way myself, but
And maybe that I'm, since it's in here as equal cost and presented essentially as equally, my guess is they're equal. Like contribution to the health benefits of the area, right, the environmental benefits. So it should, maybe the question is purely for us or the respondents, like, what's the vibe we're going for in that park? Or in that part of the
Well,
preserve.
like, I think it's true that in Lake Forest Park, there are lots of parks that have, you know, treed paths and everything, and this will be a meadow. We don't have a lot of meadows in Lake
Yeah.
Forest Park. That's why I think the meadow is so appealing. An open, sunny, you know, when the sun's out, I think it'd just be awesome.
I think we're probably aligned with that last sentence, right? More open.
Yeah.
landscape, Shrubs, meadows, plants and grasses.
Yes,
I guess assuming that all else being equal to the health of the stream.
It's not a sentence. Well, I just wanted a more open landscape.
Fun stuff up here.
and I think when they were presenting, we didn't spend a lot of time on this because the substantive things were the same between the two options. The
Yeah.
path, moving the
Right.
bridge, that where the viewing stations would be.
Yeah,
And I think we'll have another bite at all of these decisions down the road.
right.
So did you? Did you capture that point?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're to parking.
Oh, boy, here we go.
more parking. Option 2, minimal parking.
And some comments on building six.
And the general responses were 60% wanted more parking, 40% said minimal parking.
Building 6, which is number 11 on both.
Yeah, it is 11 on this graphic.
Okay.
Yeah,
But I thought that if we went with more parking.
so that's this option.
Oh,
There's that option down here. This no cabin
Mhm.
11/6, and that is more parking.
So there's sort of 3 options shown
Yeah,
here.
there's, the third since we met, this is a new option.
That's a new option. That is.
Keeps cabin
Keeps the cabin,
and then
Oh,
add some parking.
that's in some parking.
In which we can permit these to load, unload. We're probably gonna need like a staff spot down there, and we're probably gonna, you know, maybe the renter of that cabin can get like a limited spot, but we keep these load, unload 30 minutes. We don't necessarily know if we need this many ADA spots right now, but
That was one of the comments too, right?
Yeah. this is ADA has to be on.
seems a lot.
Another verbal piece of feedback I got from someone was. They said. People from the Civic Club are going to, if we have parking spots, people who can't park at the Civic Club are gonna come into this parking lot. So they were.
And vice versa, so.
And vice versa. I just feel like I just keep coming back to Tyler's point from last month, which is about behavior, and that if people are expecting or hoping for parking, that there's gonna be a constant traffic, traffic jam all the time. So if it's just normed and known that there is no parking, we will socialize different behavior.
Yeah, I definitely, when I was at the pancake breakfast at LFP, people were looking at it like, oh, there's not a lot of parking there, and I sort of be like, yeah, but look, and explain the logic that we talked about. And they're like, no, you're right. And I think the same thing would happen here, that, it will take some community outreach and education through the process to make sure that people understand, like, there cannot be enough parking here. We're not building a parking lot here. There's not gonna be a garage, so deal with it.
Permitted spot, so there's no parking, like there's no parking available unless you're unloading 15 minutes, dropping off, coming back.
Yeah, and on the minimal parking option, if we go that way, which I think was our consensus before, making clear that there are, is some sort of loading area, not necessarily a full-on spot, but. And I think that's area 1 on there, but. If you're reading it, it may not clock on the map as a loading zone because of the hash marks. But I think, if it's clear where people can go to unload their family and then go drive someplace else, I think people will deal with it.
Maybe we could create some kind of wagon program where you pick up a wagon at the parking lot, at the civic, at the, at our building. And then, you bring it over, you drop your stuff off, you leave the wagon there, pick it up when you're ready to leave. So people kind of get used to not having parking. I mean, the drop off thing is important, of course. But
Which
you know what I
doesn't
mean?
fit up.
Just have some kind of, just so people make it convenient, make it easier for them. That's what I'm thinking for their stuff. Because it's a beach, you got to bring stuff.
Yeah, I feel like people will be creative and start parking along Beach Drive
Yeah.
and
That's
parking in my neighborhood on 175th because parking is allowed on the road and it's public parking. So it's just going to be that kind of situation. As the adjacent neighborhood will be the parking lot and city hall. Or at least those who know or familiar with the place will know that if they don't want to cross the street, they will have to park on Beach Drive or on 175th and just walk to Lion Creek. But my vote is minimal parking, and I agree with what was said earlier about changing behavior. It's if you eliminate parking, it will, change behavior and let people know that there is no parking. You have to plan accordingly. It's a drop off and pickup place. And so, and it also, it's a small park. So
Right.
I do not want to see any more space for parking than necessary.
My only concern with the minimal parking option there is, I think, as you mentioned, Josh, which is it enough load and unload? Like, maybe you didn't quite say it that way. But is it, I just want to make sure there's enough spot for people who are using the building. And that if you're gonna drop stuff off, you can do that, because I think that's gonna be important. But if we could set the stage of, this is permit only and drop off, and load and unload, that's all there is in here.
So the difference between 1 and 2 is that just that the green gets
Yeah.
into a little bit.
Yep.
And then you get a couple more spots that could be load unload.
Exactly.
And I'm okay with
So
that.
that seems okay to me. I don't like the little inset on the bottom, which is just like a bunch of parking spots. That one down there. That one looks like it's more designed as a parking lot.
That would, yeah,
I think that would just, on busy days, that would just get full.
people will learn that.
Yeah.
This is, you can park, you can just park at City Hall and walk down.
And the other thing that this doesn't show, but that we did
Right.
talk about at the presentation, is the adding the sidewalk, adding the road crossing.
Yeah.
That there will
Right.
be better connection to the parking lot here.
Right.
And I think that all of that will help communicate those norms and.
And I walked down there twice today, pouring down rain. It wasn't bad.
Just practice.
Yeah. I would agree with people who say there's too many ADA parking spots for such a small park. I mean, is there a requirement that there have to be so many per
We don't
so much
necessarily
space?
know.
Corey?
You don't necessarily know the details of how many ADA spots are required yet, so it could change.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because my fear is they'll just be abused, people who want to park, say, oh, I'll take my chances and throw their cars in there.
That's right. Start charging tickets. Put a
yeah.
police officer down.
The idea is to, keeping that cabin, having a community officer down there in the summer months.
It's not blue parking spot for that.
Yeah, what you just go outside.
Yeah.
Little shock on the tires.
But yeah,
In here.
yeah, keeping a spot for staff, and I think a rental spot, and then load unload 15-20 minutes.
Yeah.
And
If that,
yeah,
really,
that,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, darn a lot of, like, our passenger load zones, like 3 minutes, right? Like,
Oh, yeah, maybe.
well, 3 minutes might be kind
Put
of
3
fast.
on there and then people will take 7.
Yeah.
Long as we're doing some.
So I'm hearing, maybe I'm hearing because I want to hear it, but I'm hearing minimal parking with enough, like, kind of permit spaces to meet the basic needs of dropping off at the park and
Yeah.
of the house. For like renters or staff.
Yeah, I mean, if people rent the house, we have to give them some slack. I mean, they're gonna need time to unload several loads probably, so.
Well,
They'll need a little more.
If
So
there's a
they would
there's
be
a-
issued a permit,
Gotta be a
right?
spot.
Art craft, like art class,
So a few spots, maybe not 0.
yeah,
Like,
so,
like option 2 looks like essentially
Right.
0.
yeah, it's, this is more called I would say this is more of the minimal
Yeah, me too.
parking.
I do think we're gonna get pushback from the residents of Beach Drive, though. I think we should prepare for that. Because I think they're gonna have a fit when they realize that we're not gonna allow parking. And they're gonna go, well, we're screwed, you know, and people will abuse Beach Drive and park over there.
I feel
So
like this
Amy,
whole-
if
And
I
maybe we'll just, we may have to help the Beach Drive people with some kind of signage saying no beach parking. You know, no Lion Creek Beach or whatever we're calling our parking.
So Amy, I do think that part of the design is to kind of have like a partial structure across the road.
You're
so that
right,
it
you're
doesn't
right.
look like, it looks more like a private drive as opposed to a through passage road. And also the council has, the city has a process if you wanted to try to get a residential parking zone. You know, with restricted parking and stuff, that if you have 70% of the residents who agree, you could do that. And I think also, as you say, signage will be good. I actually, I would say to them in general that it's better to have less parking because then you don't have people cruising.
Right,
But who knows?
yeah. I just think it's something we should be very, you know, conscientious about our neighbors on Beach Drive and want them to feel comfortable, but those are great options. I hope that they, when they, you know, start to be uncomfortable, that they understand that those are the options, Lori. That would be great.
I'm sure the council will hear and have to.
Oh, yeah. You bet.
So I'm not quite sure how to phrase our recommendation on this one, but it does sound like the concept of minimal.
So
But-
the option,
Uh-huh.
I said, the minimal option 1 parking with loading, staff and rental permanent parking.
That sounds good.
And saving building 6.
Yeah, I guess we did
Hmm.
about that, but it's,
Well, in the picture it's there,
yeah,
as opposed to the inset one.
Yeah.
So not the option 2 minimal parking, but the option 1 that leaves, that carves out some of that green space for short-term loading, unloading or something. That's where we're leading right now.
Seems like, 'cause it's not clear to me, mostly because I can't actually focus on the numbers and what they mean in that. In option 1, the extra spots that are on the left side. I think we're saying that's good as long as they're permitted and load, unload and not just general use.
Yeah.
Right, okay,
yeah, I
yeah,
don't,
that sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to option 2.
Mhm.
Which is, and I think option 1 is meant to be more of a sort of compromise based on our conversations last time.
yeah, this did come out after
Yeah.
the park board meeting, from hearing you guys, so.
And I can't, what do the numbers represent in that one? Like, I can't tell even the numbers. Two, one?
It's just more, it's just saying like this could be the pathway.
Okay.
New paved path, new gates and fencing.
Um,
I don't want the 6.
the concept of the inset piece of option 1 with much more parking. And not building 6/11,
That would be like option 3.
right? That's not that, and that one we're saying that one is fine
Wanna
to
say
get rid of.
no,
Yes,
right?
Let's do one. Okay. Does that sound good to everyone? Is that a?
How many buildings are gonna be left on the property that are there now? That's what I still can't remember.
Yeah, the main building, which is that labeled number 10 right here, that garage will be, this will be the bathroom, the public bathroom. And
Are you
then-
pointing to something? Corey
Oh,
on
yeah.
the,
Oh, can you not see that? Oh, it's, we can see it in here, huh? Sorry. Okay,
oh,
so
there,
cabin-
thank you,
yeah,
thank you.
sorry. Using the wrong mouse. Cabin 10, or that's the main house, that will be kept. The garage is number 9, and that will be turned into the public restroom.
Right,
And then this is that cabin 6 that is on the option, but the rest of the cabins will be going. And then the picnic shelter will be on the footprint of that little shed. thing out there.
okay. So one is, so parking. So the building 6 is retained with more parking. And is it removed with less parking? Is that minimal parking? Is that right?
No, it's still there. It's this option down here. That would remove that cabin and add more.
Ah,
parking.
oh, I see, okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm for removing that, I didn't want that cabin there from the first time I went over there. Cause I just think there's too many buildings on such a small piece of land. It's not very big, and look at how many buildings are gonna, why do we need so many buildings on that land?
Well, the idea of keeping that cabin 6 would be for office space, really.
Yeah, I understand that, but I just think that we've got too many buildings on a really small space. That's, I felt that when I went over there. It was like, wow, so many. Maybe I'm just
Yeah,
I'm not envisioning it, and if you guys need more office space, then, and that's the alternative, then we have to keep it, but I'm
And
not
there-
big on it.
There is like another cabin out there that is right here as well that will be going. So there's
Right.
like, there are 4
Four on that
cabins
side.
going.
3 on the-
Okay,
Well, the garage, yeah, so
Oh, the
like
big garage,
4.
yeah, yeah.
okay. Thank you.
So you'll have a bathroom, a a small cabin, and then the main house.
Right,
The 3 cabins on the north have to come out because of the way that the land was purchased.
Right.
Also like
And
refurbishing.
there's,
those.
no, I mean, there's no reason to keep them, but it's not an option.
Yeah.
yeah,
Corey?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, the graphic on option 1 and the insert, they have the same number of parking spots. It's just the design is different, where the building that's marked as 11 in the more option 1 graphic versus the is gone now at the insert. So it's basically the same thing. It's except,
Yeah, so the ADAs are slanted inwards a little bit to provide that extra room.
yeah, so I'm counting it's 5 ADA and 6 parking spots.
Yeah, so you're just losing like space.
Okay,
I see 3 parking spots on option 1.
No, there's the 3 at the top, and then like we're on number 4.
1, 2, 3 down there too.
so there's 6.
You know that,
And that can be, you know, at a later.
yeah, we'll figure out. what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the concept's super center.
So the same number of parking spots, it's just less that small? Or is it the same cutout?
Well,
no, they're more spots.
there would be more spots in this, yeah,
There would be more spots up there.
yeah, there would be more spots in this area.
And conceivably, you could even split the difference between 1 and 2. And do the 3 spots that are together.
Yeah.
and-
Yes.
and Those other 3 disconnected spots. And keep a little bit more opener.
Yeah,
You know,
I
that
think
that would
it'll-
probably suffice for loading and unloading
Yeah,
and, you know, the facility use. Without creating, maybe that balances more between, you know, not wanting people to feel like they can roll the dice and park and maybe no one will check in on them. if they
yeah,
want.
like there won't be a spot to the park, go to the park. Yeah, unless ADA, but. Unless you want. We,
Yeah, I think those are all of our design points to recommend on, is that accurate?
It didn't ask us about the deck
Yeah,
or the greenhouse, but is that just happening? You know,
oh, we didn't talk about.
Yeah, but there wasn't anything in the survey about it.
Oh,
yeah,
well,
between the
I
two,
think the people wanted the. Just the big decks,
Oh, that's nice, yeah.
the nicer
but that,
house remodel and with the separate room, I think, behind the fireplace area. And separate kitchen, and the bigger deck.
yeah,
I think, I don't know if we didn't do it, would that come up in the, open house at all?
no, I think like the house, the configuration of the house will be like the later design, that's not in like the concept
Got it.
art right now.
Well, it is 9:07, so we've gone a little late, but I think this is an important one to talk through, so thanks for your time, everybody. Maybe since we do have a couple, council members present, just see if they have any last minute comments that they want to add.
I just thank you for having such a nice delivered conversation. And the fact that you read everybody's comments and are actually quoting them. I think it's really important to show the community that we are really trying to do a lot of outreach. We really do care what you think. And so appreciate you basically vocalizing it.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to say, I appreciate the fact that your kind of comments, even on when you have a recommendation, the features that are important or changes from the design options that you'd like to see, say, on the play equipment. I think Tracy and I understand the nuance that you're offering on that, which is, yes, it's that option too, but you want it to be real playground equipment. So. So
Big
thank
plans.
you, guys. I think this has been, I hope you've appreciated the process with the consultant and Corey's help also. I think to some extent, your recommendations make our job easier, so it's appreciated.
Yeah, you guys have done a ton of outreach that I think won't necessarily be seen of you guys going out to these other groups and stuff, but I think it's been a huge success into this, the feedback.
Yeah, that's sure. Any other comments from anybody on the Parks Board? Are there any? Is anybody else on the meeting? Okay, if I'm not mistaken, that is the end of our agenda, right? Did I closed that already? Oh, no, it's right here. Oh, okay, so it's time to adjourn. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We'll schedule our meeting for next month. I'm sure it's on the calendar, but we will confirm the dates and everything.
Yeah, I think we'll be back to our regular,
Yeah, I'm out of Cub Scouts.
Yeah.
So,
so rather, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'll send an email out, but Tyler and I will work on a memo for these recommendations. We'll send it to council. And Tyler will be presenting the work plan and maybe touch on this a little bit.
okay, sure. All right, thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye.